In the world of the unknown, two souls combine to experience and unite the paranormal with its history. Join Paul and Chris on a quest to find answers only at Experiences of the Unknown.
What is
Welcome,
going
everybody.
on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Experiences of the Unknown, episode number
4.
episode number 4. Today, in this podcast episode, we'll be talking about
Amityville Horror House.
Amityville House of Horror. And here we are. What's going on, Paul?
Nothing much. How was your week?
Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, it was all right.
How about yours?
It was okay.
Yeah.
It was okay.
Sure.
When you reached out to me and you said, let's do Amityville Horror House, I'm like, ugh.
That's
so overdone. But you know what, though? When I started to look into it a little bit more.
Don't let him lie to you guys. He was excited. He was like, oh man, I've done all the research for this one. I did everything.
I did do a lot of research, but I went a little passive, like what everybody knows about it. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? Maybe we'll do it, though.
Yeah, and to be honest with you guys, there's not really, I mean, other than the movie, other than the book, there's really not that many podcasts out there with the Amityville House of Horror.
Right.
From what I found out from you today, there's only 2 that you heard of.
2.
And there's one more that I've heard of before.
But you know that when each podcast that does it, they're going to bring something different than what the other person's going to talk
everybody
about.
has their own unique way of putting out the information that, you know, they've gathered.
Right.
So let's talk about the Amityville House of Horror, as so called. 30 miles outside of New York in a Long Island town called Amityville. So there stands a house, which we all know.
Everybody's got to know the house.
Not everybody, some people. Oh man, I just completely blew this microphone out. Everybody knows the house as the Amityville House of Horror. And the reason it's known for its hauntings, supposedly its hauntings, you know, people claim to, you know, have demons in it, be the portal to hell. They've also claimed it to be the murder house, which we all know. Right. And this is a murder house. Let's talk about some of the things that did happen there. Let's talk about the facts of this house originally from what we got. There was a murder that took place there in 1974. The murder happened from the Defeo family, if I'm not mistaken. The Defeo family, there was 6 people that were murdered by the son, who was Ronald Defeo Jr.
Other name as Butch.
Butch.
Right.
Let's talk about Butch here. Mr. Butch. So if you guys don't know much about this history, the murders ended up taking place. Oh, that's weird. The murders ended up taking place in 74. They were killed by Ronald Jr. Ronald Jr.
When the family slept.
Yeah, when they slept. The weird part is, do you think they were killed? Well, we'll get to that in here. Apparently, this, you know, Ronald Jr. killed 6 people at the same time, same night in this house, while they all slept with a 35. I believe it was a 35 Marlin rifle.
Right.
I don't know if you guys know much about guns, but that's a pretty loud.
See, I don't know too much about guns, but you would, though.
Yeah, so I mean that would be a pretty loud round to be shooting off in the house. I mean, I know I get the house is big,
Right.
but yet you're gonna shoot 6 people in the house and not one person's gonna wake up.
But nobody heard it. Nobody heard the gunshots go off.
Right.
The neighbors were being interviewed by law enforcement. They didn't hear anything.
The weird part about this is that the neighbors report the dog was actually tied up outside, and they complain about the dog barking all night.
But nothing about the gunshots.
But nothing about gunshots. Like you're talking about a dog but no gunshots. I mean, that would be 6 gunshots going off.
And the family themselves didn't even hear anything, because the odd thing about it was they were all found laying in the same position on their stomachs when law enforcement went in.
Yeah, which is also kind of interesting.
Right.
If I remember correctly, the mother, I forget her name. Do you have the name? I have the name somewhere in here. Lewis, if I'm not mistaken, she was found on the bed. She was shot on the bed, but there's at close range.
Right.
And there's no blood, no nothing on the bed frame.
Even the father didn't even hear. Ronald Sr. didn't even hear.
Right, but just the simple fact that there's no blood on the bed frame or the bed headboard. You know, if you're getting shot in the head by that kind of caliber,
there would be blood everywhere. The walls, the ceilings,
you know, it'd be
the
some
floor.
kind of blood splattered at least somewhere. So I mean, there's a lot of weird things about this story. I mean, the murders did take place, so we'll talk about facts. The murders did take place. Ronald, he was 23 years old when the murders took place. Brief history about Ronald. He practically had a good life. His dad was a little bit on the abusive side. You know, he was the black sheep of the family.
He was very abusive, of what I read.
Yeah. The father.
Right, the father. Treated the son like shit. Matter of fact, he treated the whole family like shit. He beat the wife.
Yeah, so he had a very, like, dominating personality.
Right.
We'll talk about it.
Right.
So, but Butch was the one that took the grunt of it.
Yeah.
Butch was the one that got, you know, he was made fun of in school. You know, on top of that, his dad would, you know, treat him like shit. So if we're talking about that, like, I mean, and then your dad owns a dealership and starts giving you money, and you have all the money, all the access in the world to whatever money you want to have. You know, essentially, you're having a good life. He starts saving up money, starts buying guns, and he started building an arsenal. He started building his own arsenal between the money he was getting. And then let's talk about, you know, Junior here for a minute. He starts getting into drugs, alcohol.
Disappearing days on end. Going out drinking. But what I don't understand is he was like doing all that, partying, giving the family a hard time, but the father still kept giving them money. Right.
Well, it was like one of those things, you know, like you have access to whatever money you want in the world.
Right.
At least like that your dad has. So, I mean, as time goes on, you know, things seem to be progressively getting a little worse with Junior here, Butch, as you call him, however you want to call him. And he ends up committing the murders. He ends up killing his family. He ended up killing practically 6 people total. I mean, you know, he killed Ronald Sr., Lewis, 18-year-old Dawn, I believe was his sister, 13-year-old Allison, 12-year-old Mark, 9-year-old John Matthew. But my main thing with this, if you guys do a little more research, not research, but if you guys watch the movies, watch anything, you can tell, like, from these murders, like, from any other person, any outsider looking in, there had to have been at least more than one person to commit this murders. Like, it could have just been him by himself.
See now, I think he's the only. But this is where, like, you and I differ.
Right.
Like with the research and everything, I personally think he did it, and you think there's multiple people.
Yeah, and the reason I think there's multiple people is because of the type of caliber rifle that he's using. 6 people in one night in a matter of seconds, like while they're all supposedly sleeping, doesn't really add up to me. You know, especially all in one household, nobody hearing a gunshot. I get to make silencers, but for that kind of rifle, you know, like no matter what silencer you have, like somebody would at least heard it.
Right.
You know. And just the simple fact that after he commits these murders, he goes on about his day, takes a shower.
Yeah.
And then goes drinking and starts acting like something.
But that's when he started running his mouth off, though. After
well, he starts talking to people in the neighborhood. You know, I haven't been able to get a hold of my dad and this and that, trying to make himself, like, kind of build an alibi for himself. And from there on, like, it just, you know, he ends up going to the bar. He meets up with his friend. He starts telling him, like, hey, like, listen, like, I haven't been able to get a hold of my dad, this and that. And then next thing you know, like, they're going to his house, they're finding the bodies, and he's making a show or a scene because, you know.
Right, but he kept changing his stories, though. I mean, first he said that somebody broke into the house, killed the family. Then he said it was mob related.
Right.
That the mob came and made him kill his family. Then he said it was demon.
And then he started blaming other mob members.
Right.
Supposedly he started coming up with lies and stories about his dad owing money to certain people and this and that. But the moral of that story, to me, like at least to that murder scene, is more of someone who's not stable, who's taken a lot of narcotics, a lot of drugs over the years, which kind of, started altering his way of thinking,
And he had a lot of issues.
Yeah.
A lot of issues.
And just think about, how much trauma a child can go through, when they have an abusive, father, abusive parent. And on top of that, they have an not abusive, but, they get made fun of in school.
Right.
What kind of traumatic events, or traumatic issues that would cause in somebody's, head, especially with him. And then, you add alcohol, you add drugs, you add all kinds of hallucination drugs to that.
Right.
And you have the Amityville Horror.
Right.
So let's fast forward a little bit. Anything else you want to touch on that?
Nope, we're good with that one.
So let's move forward a little bit.
Let's get to the Lutzes.
Yeah, this is Paul's favorite part. Like he's all excited about the Lutzes. A little bit over a year later, after the homicide took place,
exact year,
the murders took place in this house, the Lutzes come into the equation. They buy the house for $80,000,
which was pretty reasonable,
right? Well,
for that type of house,
and it was purchased very cheap because of the murders.
Yes,
because of the murders.
But they weren't told at first, though, about the murders.
They were?
Not at first, no.
I didn't read that, so I don't know. You're right. Whatever you say on this part, you're right.
I mean, they weren't told exactly about the murders until they decided to buy the house. When they decided to buy the house, that's when they were told. But they still took it anyway.
Right. They ended up purchasing the house.
They even took the furnishings. The house came fully furnished.
Yeah.
And all that belonged to the Defeo family. Now, can you imagine how much energy it's tied with all that stuff?
Not only that, but think about, was the house at least clean? Did they clean the blood stains? Did they clean the blood?
No, they cleaned the blood stains off. I mean, all that. But the Lutzes even took the bed frames. They kept the beds that the kids were killed in. Yeah. And the Lutzes, they had issues too, just like the Defeos did before moving in.
Right.
Because George Lutz, he was very abusive to the kids. He was abusive to Kathleen. And then when they moved into the house, that got worse. I mean, it's just like the Defeo family all over again.
Yeah, so you add all that into the equation. The Lutz's family moved into the house. They lived there for approximately 28 days.
28 days.
Within these 28 days, this is where all the movies and books and everything come from. From 28 days only of living in this house. Which...
28 days of pure health.
For some reason, still doesn't, I don't know. Something just doesn't sit well with me in regards to that. Living in this house for 28 days and having this much activity and all these things that are said to happen within those 28 days.
And it's supposed to happen as soon as they moved in, too. George was supposed to have been so easygoing and, he ran a business, but as soon as he got in there, he started to, not care about things. Right. He started to get sluggish and keep him to himself.
So from the moment, let me step back a little bit. From the moment they moved into the house, they started having paranormal activity.
Right.
At least according to, was it Kathy? Was her name? I forget her name. Kathy.
The wife.
The wife.
Kathleen.
Kathy. So from the moment they moved in, they started experiencing paranormal activity. Kathy, for some reason, felt somebody touching her hand in the middle of the night.
Right.
Or actually, it was during the day, not at night, because they made that very specific,
right.
Very clear. She had some random person touch her hand. She doesn't know who was there. They started having random knocks on the doors.
Bed shaking.
The one that gets me the most is the levitating. While they were sleeping, Kathy and both of the boys were supposed to be levitating above their bed.
I don't think that was even in the movie, was it? I don't think so.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Think so.
It's been a while since I watched the movie.
It's been a long time.
And then everything from the simple fact that they had these things that are levitating, these people that are levitating, to George waking up at 3:15 in the morning, which is the same time the murder supposedly are said to occur.
3:15 every
3:15
day.
every night.
Every day. But what a lot of people don't know is that I found out, like during some of my research, and you found out that he was doing black magic.
Yeah, so they claimed that he had some kind of a cult. He was very familiar with different type of occult type of things that were going on in the house.
And of course, that didn't help matters any.
Right, but what gets me the most, and we'll get to this, there was a 1979 interview conducted by Good Morning America with George, Kathy, and the original cast member for the original
James
movie.
Brolin.
James, right. So with that being said, you have him denying when he was specifically asked by the Good Morning America cast member, like, hey, like, occults, like,
Right.
where did you do any of that? He doesn't necessarily say no,
But he doesn't say yes.
right? But his exact response was, I didn't believe in it until we moved into the house. That was his exact response. So, like, I didn't believe in it until we moved into the house.
I don't know about that.
Right.
I don't know about
that. There's a lot of weird things happening with this story. Like you have that. You have the green ooze supposedly coming out of the walls.
Now, if you watch the movie, they had it like all coming down, like it was oozing out of the walls, but it wasn't like that.
No. So his actual explanation in this interview as well, which we'll post and we'll have it up with our video
Right.
too. His actual explanation was there was like green
Like gelatin. Type
like spread all over the wall, and at some points they believed it was probably their kids spearing things on the walls, but they couldn't find a logical explanation for what it was. They didn't know if it was the kids. They didn't know
Right.
if it was anything else. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then the other weird substance occurrence that they had were
Looked like mud in the toilets.
yeah, it was like the black.
water,
it was
right.
like some kind of black substance all over the porcelain toilets and on the actual door handles and the door holes, the keyholes.
They heard running up and down the steps.
Running up and down the steps.
Supposedly they saw what appeared to be a pig.
Yeah, so that's they yeah. This is the weird part. Hold on, I'm trying to get to that pig thing because it's still to this day like it doesn't make sense. They saw pig-like creatures with red eyes staring down at George and his sons through the windows.
Now, it's funny when you talk about that, because yesterday I watched a documentary by Daniel Lutz, the son, and he just released his story on the DVD, his version of what happened, but it's from the kid's point of view, what he
Right.
experienced. He said when he looked out the window, it looked like a pig, had red fluorescent eyes, but he said the teeth was like jagged, like real sharp.
Kind of like a shark.
Yeah, like a shark
Yeah.
type of teeth. And he said it made like an odd noise and then it just disappeared.
Oh.
Now, this is a bedroom that it's up on the second floor. Now, was there a tree outside? I mean,
Right, and then you have
was
like
there an animal sitting out there looking in? Or, I mean,
yeah, then you have the reports of the spirits knocking knives down in the kitchen. Then we go back to Kathy levitating. They had garage doors opening and closing by themselves,
right.
which is pretty interesting. But I don't know. This is one of those stories that just makes you think because you don't know what's real or what to think
Right.
of it.
What's the truth and what's
Especially-
not the truth?
Right, especially having the original author from the actual book, which was their lawyer, right? The original author claims that they had too many bottles of wine.
Jay Anson.
Yeah, they had too many bottles of wine, and they came up with this whole idea and this whole story. So
Now-
you don't know what to believe at this point.
Yeah, because now Jay Anson, he was their lawyer. He was also the author of the book.
And they were having money issues at the time, too.
Right. Now, people were saying, but they were like having issues, like they weren't able to afford their mortgage because they paid $80,000 for the house.
Right.
And what I read through my research was they only could afford between $30,000 and $50,000.
Right.
But they haven't been there
They were only there for 28 days.
Yeah, not even a month to get behind.
But here's the thing that doesn't get explained, though.
With their mortgage.
And I tried looking into it. They lived there for 28 days. However, it doesn't say how long they owned the house for. So they might have just lived there for those 28 days, and within those 28 days they decided to get out, but still owned the house and still did their own things in the house. Which, that's also not explained anywhere, really.
Right.
So, which would be something also to look into, talking about the house and how long did they really own the house. I know that since the murder took place, there was 4 other families that lived in this house.
But they didn't report anything paranormal.
Right, and the most recent, I think it was recently sold in 2017.
Right.
And it was sold for $200,000 less than what the asking price was for the house, which is kind of odd because I mean, you've seen the property. The property and the house it's beautiful. It's like old timey, and I like it. Something I would live in.
Now, like I mentioned earlier, I watched the documentary on Daniel Lutz. He has major issues. Now, you got to remember, he was a kid when he lived at Amityville.
Right.
Now, he reported the same thing as what's been reported, like in the movie, what you've seen in movies, in the book. But, like, he recalled when the priest showed up at the house. He was in the U-Haul truck, moving boxes around, carrying boxes in. When
we haven't touched on the priest yet.
No. Well, I
guess
we are now. When when the father arrived, he said he remembers the priest arriving. He remembers the priest going into the house. At the time, he was still in the U-Haul truck because he's rearranging the boxes, and he went in. He made it as far as the boy's bedroom, and when he heard the demon voice say, "Get out," he left. And then he reported, he come down, and Daniel heard him say, I gotta go.
Right.
But it didn't click in his head, like, why is he saying that?
Yeah.
He said, I just gotta go. And then he mentioned about flies, like between 400, 500 flies being in the room. He had to go. So we didn't think nothing of it. But he heard his mom and dad panic a little bit. So he continued moving the boxes. So he finally went up to, which was the boys' room, which they were making into the sewing room. So he put the boxes in there. His brother came and they started talking. So he walked over to the window, put his hands on the windowsill, and then that's when the window slammed down on his hands. But he also said, at that time, there were still about 400, 500 flies.
That was the other story that was kind of weird.
And he said they couldn't.
The flies coming in, and apparently even in the winter, they had over hundreds of flies, like in the one room. Right. They reported strange odors coming from that room as well, and that's where the green ooze and everything ended up taking place. But the weird part about this whole story that kind of leaves your mind kind of like boggled is the simple fact that George and Kathy were able to take a lie detector test.
And they passed.
And they passed.
I
mean, there is ways around it. There is ways that you can pass it.
Right.
But that's. I mean, maybe they took those routes, but it's kind of hard. I mean, it's hard in itself to pass it, but if you know what you're doing, then you'll be able to pass it.
Right.
Especially having a lawyer, that was basically they gave all the rights to for the story and everything else.
It was reported that they made $100,000 off the book and $100,000 off the movie, and that's it.
So they got $200,000.
Right. So.
And all that money just went to the producers and
the Anson family
and the lawyer. Yeah.
The lawyer's family, because they signed the rights over.
That's crazy.
But.
Hey. So we're going to touch a little bit on the priest also. There was a priest that came to the house. It was a Ralph. I'll tell you right now his name is Ralph.
We did do our research.
Bravo.
See, I got a different name.
What'd you get?
I got. Let me see here. We did do our research, folks.
We did.
I'm just bad with names. I got Father Ralph. Let's
Ralph?
just say Father Ralph.
Yeah, so it's Ralph Picaravo or something. I can't pronounce
So
his
I'm bad
last
with
name.
I'm bad with last names.
So I don't know if that's a made up name. I don't know if that's a name that they just decided to use. There is an interview of the actual priest that conducted the interview, and he wanted to remain nameless and didn't want anybody to know his identity.
Because the funny thing is about it, when you mentioned that priest name, it was like, that's not what I got.
Yeah.
So I went back through my notes and I'm like looking, I'm like, that's not what I got.
Yeah, so there's a possibility it could be like a made up name they came up with. I am going to put in this video.
There is an interview with him.
Interview. What was that show from back in your day?
In Search of.
In Search of. So,
and that's going way back.
Yeah, so there was an interview done or conducted for the father that actually did the walkthrough. It wasn't an exorcism. He just did the walkthrough of the location.
Yeah, he just did the walkthrough.
So within that walkthrough, he got smacked in the back of the head.
Right.
He heard the person telling him to get out.
The flies.
Did he experience the flies?
Yes.
Okay. And then shortly after leaving the residence, he began to experience having welts on his hands that, he went to the doctors and nobody really had any explanation for it. The closest explanation was stress. They told him there was possibly there was like stress, that he had stress, he was stressed out, and these welts supposedly were appearing because of that.
Right.
With that being said, that's all we know about the priest. The
Other
priest
than that,
was,
his name keeps changing.
Right. So, but like I said, we do have the interview. We'll put the interview up with these videos,
Right.
with our YouTube videos. So if you guys are listening to us on the podcast, make sure to watch the YouTube video. We also have the YouTube video out there. But with that being said, like this is a very mind-boggling story, because at the end of the day, no matter how much research you do, you really don't get.
You're still not 100%.
Right, you won't get a precise answer like on whether it's true or whether it's fake. I also have a video of the Defeo's family's friend who used to spend time in that house back in the day, and I have a video of her while doing a walkthrough in the Red Room, where they called the Red Room, and she stated that it's not haunted or nothing really evil happens there. So
now, a lot of people don't know is that George Lutz had reached out to an investigative reporter named Laura DiDito. She worked on NBC 5, and he had reached out to her in the very beginning and asked her if she knew like anybody that was like good in the paranormal field, somebody that they can trust to bring into their home.
right.
And at the time when he called to reach out to her, she was working on a project dealing with psychic mediums that was going to air on NBC.
Right.
So she says, as a matter of fact, I do know some people, which was Ed and Lorraine Warren. And that's where they came in
Okay.
into the picture. She had called them. But the thing is, she told them that she would bring them in, but only if she got the exclusive story
For the house.
Right, for NBC Channel 5.
Huh.
And that's how she came in. And then she played a big part with them coming in and investigating
Right.
Amityville.
Huh. That's
It's
interesting.
all little different twists and turns.
Yeah. So like kind of. There's definitely more to this story that we know about.
A lot.
And I don't think we'll ever really get the entire answer to it. Like, we could always try to investigate the location. We don't even know if they even wanted to investigate it. The current owners went as far as changing the address from 112 to 108. Was
Right.
it 108 Ocean Avenue or something like that? I forget what it was.
But
I do know it went from 112 to 108, and that was, if you're going as far as doing that, like, you obviously don't want anybody coming to the house. You don't want anybody coming to look at it or
Right.
even experience what the house really has, or
Right.
if it even has anything.
Now, the funny thing about, well, it's not funny, but when I was watching the documentary on Daniel's
documentary. Okay.
case, or whatever, Now, he was saying that George Lutz had an attachment, but also him.
So they both had one.
So apparently they both had one, as per what Daniel said.
Right.
Could that... Now, when they decided to leave that house after, 28 days? Could it be possible that the attachment went with Daniel? And that's why the other 4 families that moved in after the Lutzes didn't experience anything?
There's a possibility, but if you think about it, why didn't it happen with Defeo that actually conducted the killing, went as far as killing 6 people?
Right.
Which, till this day, I don't think they were killed on that property or on, where they said they were killed at.
You don't think they were killed in the house?
No, I think I mean...
Now, yeah, but if you looked at the kids' beds, though, the kids' bed had blood all over the mattress, all over the floor.
Which, realistically talking, there would be blood from them being shot in the head. But if you get shot in the head, at a point blank, especially with that kind of rifle,
it would be all over.
Some kind of splash pattern or some kind of pattern, on the opposite end, depending on which end you got shot from. There would still be some kind of pattern, maybe on the headboard, like they talked about. Because apparently Kathy, from doing the research, not Kathy, I'm sorry, Lewis was supposed to be sitting upright on the headboard, and there was no splash matter, no brain matter, no nothing on the headboard. So that's also something weird or something. I mean, and it would kind of explain that they were killed off the property,
and then brought back.
Why nobody heard the gunshots. You know what I mean?
Because that is kind of odd, though. I mean, think about it.
Right. So I mean, there's a possibility.
Or maybe it was mob related, and
this is all a speculation.
All speculation, yeah.
This isn't legit, but
maybe the neighbors did hear something, and they were warned not to say nothing.
Well, the weird part is that they went as far as calling the cops because of the dog barking outside.
It wasn't because they were
this entire time the dog was outside. He was tied to, I forget what he was tied to. He was tied to something weird. But if you go as far as that, you would think they would call in gunshots, especially 6. Not just 1, you know what I mean? So, and that's the other thing. Why didn't they wake up in the meantime? I get some people go to REM sleep and they sleep for a while, but if you hear gunshots, man, especially in the house, you're gonna wake up. You're gonna wake up. You're gonna hear something. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's gonna be some kind of defensive wounds or some kind of something for them to be defending themselves. I don't know. I still don't get it. I still don't understand. The only possible explanation is that they were killed off the property, not in the house, and then they were just probably placed in each individual's room to make it seem like they were killed there.
But can you imagine moving into a home that had that type of killing in it?
Well, I mean, let's think about it. How many homicides happen a day in different areas?
A lot. Every minute of the day.
How many houses this specific thing happens in that you don't know about? You might be going into a house that maybe it's 200-300 years old and something much worse than this Amityville Horror happens. You know what I mean? That's the weird part, and that's what I understand. Like I said from the beginning, I don't understand the simple fact that if they were killed in the house, you would have some kind of evidence or something leading that they were killed there, especially with that kind of rifle. From what I understand, it did find that Butch did own that rifle, and that's how they figured out that it was him, because they used the same caliber rifle that he owned in his little arsenal that he had in his room. But yeah, I mean, just put your mind into thinking how many houses do you go into that have had similar events, similar occurrences? How many places have we investigated that have had things much worse than this happen in them? White Hill, for instance. You have some weird instances that have happened there. You know what I mean? But
let's go back to that now. Let's go back to the paranormal part of it now.
Okay.
Now, do you believe that?
No.
You don't believe that George and Daniel both had
were
attachments?
possessed?
Yeah.
No, I think that's I think George did that because of the drugs and everything that he was taking. You know,
And plus, it was reported that he was doing black magic, like we said earlier.
or George, you're talking about George,
George,
the father.
yes.
It was reported, yes.
Now,
I think that has, if there is some kind of paranormal activity or anything paranormal happening in that location, has to do with whatever he was doing.
Now,
I don't think that Butch was possessed. I don't think he had any kind of paranormal thing happen to him. Which, I mean, there is a possibility
Right.
because you do have that possibility of, you know, when you move into a location, like, you know, the spirit's using you for them to get high. So maybe at that time when they were alive, like, you know, they were very drug dependent.
Right.
And there has been cases and there has been different types of examples basically showing, you know, that the spirits use this person, you know, as their way to get high.
Right.
As their way to still go back or go about the ways that they were back in those days. As far as being possessed by something negative, speaking just for Butch, no, I think it was just the drugs that he was taking, everything that he went through,
right.
that trauma that he experienced.
Now that's Butch. Now,
that's Butch. Now going over
to the Lutzes.
To the Lutzes. The Lutzes, for me, like I said from the beginning, if there's anything paranormal going there, it has to do with anything that maybe
First of all, you got like all the furnishings that was in the house left there from the Defeos.
Right,
so you got that energy there. Now, whether George Lutz was on drugs or whatever, or did black magic. Now, Daniel at the time was 10 years old. Now, you know he wasn't doing drugs or anything like that. My opinion, when I watched that video yesterday of him telling the story, because I've been through and having an attachment, I've been through 2 deliverances and an exorcism myself, so I know the signs. I know what to look for. When I looked at his, when he sat there talking, he has major issues. Do I think he has an attachment? I really think he has an attachment. Because everything that he talked about, not remembering days, he's full of anger and hate. I mean, this is all stuff that I've been through.
Right.
And just by sitting there watching him, I see it all over again. So do I think that he might have an attachment? I think he has an attachment. I think he needs to get help.
Yeah.
Because he is so screwed up. It's a shame. The man's 55 years old today.
Yeah.
And he hates to go back and talk about that because to him, that's going back into hell. And that's what his exact words was. Hell.
Well, and supposedly he was still having like nightmares and everything from.
And he's still having dreams. He's still having dreams about it. He has dreams floating on the river, looking up, and there goes the house. There's the boathouse, and there's reasons why.
And I'm not saying there's not an attachment because of that. But
Right.
I mean, like I said, whatever George was doing, that nobody really seems to know.
Maybe George had the attachment and it went on to him. I mean, we don't know.
Maybe he summoned something that he wasn't supposed to summon. Like, you know, like you have all these stories, like when people play with Ouija boards, you know, they have things that attaches to them, and they have all these experiences kind of similar to what he's experiencing.
And supposedly Kathleen was supposed to know that he was doing black arts.
Right, but going back to Devil's Advocate here, going back to the trauma, the things. So let's say I'm gonna put it this way. Let's say you and I go to an investigation. I hear something on a recorder, like, "Hey Paul, like, do you hear this?" And I'll tell you exactly what I hear.
Right.
Your mind's gonna automatically want to go to, "Yeah, I do hear. I hear exactly what you said," because now that I mentioned that, it's fresh in your head and you're.
Yep, that's what it said. That's what it said.
Right, that's all you're listening for.
So instead of handing me the headphones, say, "Here, you tell me what you hear."
Right.
Right.
So keep in mind, like, you know, the son is living through what their parents are portraying. They're saying that that's occurring. Whether or not it was occurring, whether or not it was happening in his house, they're still telling him, like, this is what's happening.
Right.
At 10, you said he was 10, right?
He was 10.
At 10 years old, your imagination is going to kick into play.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, but like say when him and his brother were in that room,
Yeah.
he experienced the flies.
Oh no, I'm not saying he's.
Oh, I
I'm
know.
just playing devil advocate here. Like I'm just, yeah, I'm just saying, I'm just playing devil advocate. So like looking at it from the outside
Right.
in, somebody who really doesn't believe in that. Let's say like somebody doesn't believe in it. These are ways that you're going to be able to
Right.
explain it. These are ways that you're going to look around it, and when you're being told like this is what's happening, this is what's happening. Look at this. Like you see that person walking, you see that pig staring out the window. They might not be seeing the same thing. They might,
Right.
but each person sees it a different way.
A lot of people around that area think all that was a hoax.
Right.
But as soon as the book came out in September, October of '77, something like that, everybody's like, it's a hoax. Still today, a lot of people in that area think it's a hoax.
Well, even the author said it was a hoax.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They had wine, they had dinner. Let's make this up, and
so it's just like I said. I mean, it's there are some facts there
Right.
that are said to have happened. We pointed out the facts, like the murders did take place. There was drug use. You have George Lutz who purchased a house for the $80,000 and lived there for 28 days, and
Right.
there are some other speculations saying he could afford a house. And
yeah, because when Ed and Lorraine when they did the first initial walkthrough, there was laundry folded on the table, there was food in the refrigerator, food in the freezer, it just seemed like they just went out for the day.
Right.
So who would just like get up, leave everything behind?
They must have experienced something serious.
Right. Some people say, oh, they did it for the book and everything, but
Right.
it was not guaranteeing that the book was going to be a hit. The movie wasn't going to be a hit.
But I mean,
It's a lot of different.
it's a very messed up story. Like I don't know what to think. Like my part of me wants to say it's a hoax. Part of me, like based on certain parts of the story, like wants to think that it's real, that they did experience something.
Right.
Now, there's always the possibility where they did experience something, but there's also that possibility where they didn't.
Right.
So that's for you guys to figure
Yeah.
out. You
Now-
guys comment us and tell us exactly what you think. Like, let us know, like, if you think that the Amityville House of Horror was a hoax,
Or was it real?
or if you're like me, like you think certain parts of it are real and certain parts are just built up upon those scenarios that did occur and that did happen. But
I mean, tell us. I mean, if you think they were murdered somewhere else and they were brought back to the bedrooms, tell us.
yeah. So just let us know your thought, like what you guys think. If it's the same thing, if it's something at least similar to what we think.
Right.
But yeah, I think this about wraps it up.
Wraps
You got
it up.
anything else?
No, that's about it.
All right. Well, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media accounts: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
Facebook, Podbean, iHeartRadio.
Yeah, we're on iHeartRadio, Apple
Spotify.
Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music.
Apple
You
Music.
name it, we're on there. Look us up. Experiences.
Yeah,
of
we're
the
everywhere.
Huh?
We're everywhere now.
We are.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you kind of realize when you start talking about it, like you don't realize, like,
It's like now the list is getting long. It's like, did I name this? Did I say this?
But just type us up on Google, the experiences for the unknown or of the unknown, and everything would come up.
Experiences of the unknown.
Of the unknown. We always say.
We're on
for-
it. Did we say Instagram too?
Yeah, we said Instagram.
We said Instagram.
Yeah,
Say.
But yeah, like I said, don't forget to like, subscribe, and please share if you like our podcast.
And if you don't
know what I
like
mean?
us, you could tell us that too. I mean,
Yeah, we are open to constructive criticism. Until then, thanks for watching.
thanks.
And,
We'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Paul to say thank you. You too.
Thank you. You too.
All right. All right, guys.
Good night,
Thanks
everybody.
again.